Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Light Bytes, which I'm shamelessly calling Season 3. And this is our second episode of Light Bytes for the year. If you are new to Light Bytes, thank you for joining us. It's an event that we started 3 years ago now, just before or 2 years ago, actually, just before we went into lockdown. And basically, it's once a month, first Thursday of every month. We gather genius people from all around the world, and we just talk about light and lighting and design and theatre and all that sort of stuff. So thank you very much for joining us. So yeah, let's kick it off. So this is our next session, talking about collaborations, and I'm super excited to have two very dear friends joining me in the session today, Greg Maqoma and Oliver Hauser. Welcome. Thank you very much for taking the time out to join us in Light Bytes. Thanks for having us. You're welcome. So the reason I've got you here is because I was able to see your production of Cion that was in London last September last year, if I've got that right, somewhere around there. It was last year, definitely, and I know you've been...
2019.
No, wait, was it as long ago as that?
Yeah.
See, I've just blocked out the COVID period. Right? As far as I'm concerned, that didn't exist. We're just cutting that out. Edit.
Yeah, it was when we're still flying and doing things that we like, without any mask, without any care in the world. That was the time.
Wow. Okay. Good. I had no idea it was that long ago. And I know it's gone on and it's been touring, and obviously it's been difficult through COVID. But I know you've started to get it back out on the road again, and it was just such an extraordinary show that I thought I couldn't pass up an opportunity to chat to the minds that sort of put this work together. So, Greg, over to you first. Just a quick hello and just introduce yourself to our audience, and then I'll come to Oliver.
Good. Thank you, Declan, for having me on this platform. I mean, quite recently, I was just now in London. I just came back to South Africa, and now we're connecting via Zoom. We should have been able to meet face to face, but as usual, schedules determine otherwise. So my name is Greg Maqoma. I'm born in South Africa, Soweto, in the townships south of Johannesburg. Yeah, I started dance really in the township and growing up, because I was exposed to a number of things which form part of my visual and movement aesthetics. Because I grew up surrounded by smoke that was emanating from our households during the winter period, but also smoke that was coming out from burning tires, burning government buildings. So the smoke has become really a symbol of my work throughout my career. And then also I grew up quite close to a hostel which housed migrant workers who came to Johannesburg to seek opportunities from all over Southern Africa. And it is those the collision of cultures for me that has been an interesting part in terms of me making work, and the decision to also create a company, Vuyani Dance Theatre, in 1999, where I wanted to have a playground where all these ideas and ambitions can be brought up into an open without any fears, or without me having to conform to any form of without any fears, to not to conform to any style or to any way of expression. So that was really important for me to do that. So yeah, now we 22 years in the running as a company, and I have been working a lot with Declan from the onset. I mean, he's been lighting the pieces that I've been creating. And Declan, when he left the country, he said, I've got someone very special who he has been working with and mentoring, Oliver Hauser. And Oliver is stuck with us now. So every production there's Oliver that I need to bring on board. So it's been that of relationship that started with you, Declan, and has moved on to that continuity is with Oliver. Yeah, I will hold it there for now.
Amazing, thank you, Oliver. Yeah, I mean, Greg's kind of your agent, it seems, as well.
Yeah. Well, My name's Oliver Hauser, and I'm a South African lighting designer, and technician and programmer and various different things, and technical manager and HOD and many different things, as we do in South Africa. I've been working in the industry for almost 15 years now, predominantly in theatre. I do light a lot of television as well, quite recently. But mainly I've grown up and my passion lies within the theatrical environment. I've been working with Greg for, gosh, ever since I think I started mentoring Declan, actually. And Greg was actually the first person to give me a real opportunity to kind of showcase my somewhat lighting talents. And yeah, everything has kind of been history. I've studied at Tshwane University of Technology. I did a diploma in entertainment technology, and I'm currently studying an advanced diploma in illumination engineering through BHA lighting, and hopefully sort of trying to carve a niche also in the architectural kind of lighting environment. So trying to bring in a theatrical aspect to the architectural environment. But that's something that I'm sort of nurturing as I go. And yeah, I work currently for a company called Gearhouse Splitbeam, which is a theatrical rental company, and I work as in-house lighting designer and HOD. But I also, during COVID, I started freelancing again. But I'd been freelancing prior to working for Splitbeam for almost 7 years. And I ran a company called Hauser Lighting Design for that time. And that's sort of how I grew my reputation. Yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. So a production like Cion, how, and I guess, Greg, it kind of, the idea, starts with you. Where does this start? What's your sort of process when you are creating something new?
Sorry, I must always remember to unmute. So yeah, I mean, the process for me starts with that dream. A story or an idea has to haunt me up to a point where I feel like I have absolutely no choice but to do something with it. And once I go into the process of wanting to do something, I bring together a team of people that I want to work with. And when I bring the team of people that I want to work with, I bring the team that I know for sure they can come into a space and be able to deliver on their own, heightened artistic contribution to the project. And I want them to run with it from the beginning, to say, this is the concept, this is the idea I have. How do you fit in? How does your ability as a designer, whether lighting, whether stage, whether costume, fit into this vision? Or what is it that you would like to bring into the broader vision of the work? So really it becomes at the end a collaborative effort. I have always refused to create works in isolation, because it's a lonely place to be in. So I always want to hold on to people. I want to be able to pick up a phone and say, what do you think of this idea? So that, the work in itself organically kind of grows, because you have people in the room that can hold you and that you can trust, that can guide you differently, that can push you in different directions. So yeah, for me, that is the process of saying, I'm sharing the vision, let's all go and dream, and let's come back and see, what your dreams look like and how do they fit into the broader vision.
And Oliver, I'm right in thinking that you were set and lighting design on this on Cion. I've got that right, yeah?
Yes. I originally, actually, in the original version, I just did set design, which was really interesting because Greg kind of pulled me out of my comfort zone, because normally I would light, and I do love to get involved in set, because set and lighting obviously go hand in hand. And it was really an amazing opportunity to kind of get out of that comfort zone and create something really truly magical, and interesting, and something visually interesting for the piece. And it really challenged me that way, because I was in that lighting space of mind, but having someone else in control of what I really kind of feel like I should have been involved in, you know. And so like being in that space was really, really cool, because working with Manny, who lit it originally and who was behind the original lighting vision, we worked really closely, and we found that we worked really well together, because we both had that lighting mindset, and we both kind of see eye to eye that way, and we both theatrical designers, and we just had this amazing connection, which was just quite incredible. And I didn't think it was going to quite be that way when I first started, because I was, number one, quite intimidated, because Manny is, you know, a legend of.
He's a legend. Yeah,
he's a legend of the South African industry, and those of you who are not familiar,
a 20-year designer, yeah.
Exactly. And for those of you who are watching who are not familiar with Manny, Manny is a true pioneer of South African lighting design, and he was one of the founding members of the Market Theatre, who were churning out some very interesting protest theatre during apartheid, and during the very tough times in South Africa. And he would fill many different roles, but one of those roles would be lighting design. And he's also been kind of a mentor to me. So being able to be in the same space as him and create work with him was quite intimidating, but at the same time, like, incredibly fulfilling.
I have to confess, I'm a bit jealous. I would have loved to have collaborated with Manny. It's one of those things that just would have been so awesome to do. So yeah, and okay, so as part of your conception, Greg, you mentioned how important smoke is to you, and we'll get around to some of the production images in a second. But it's absolutely one of the sort of big visual aesthetics in the show is the beam work, and is that. And it's tricky, right? Because haze and smoke is notoriously difficult to control. You know, it's not like you can say in this moment, I need the smoke here, and then we're going to do it there. You know, I'd love to be able to, you know, and the day somebody can give us a smoke machine that we can do that with, will be fantastic. I mean, obviously, you know, between you and Manny, you were chatting haze or smoke and all those kind of things. Are there things that you needed to build into your design, Oliver, to help try and contain that as much as possible?
So it's just interesting, like for those of you who don't know, the story of Cion revolves around a book by Zegsimda, and it's the story of a character named Tolaki, he's a professional mourner, and it's his story essentially, and it follows his sort of his life and kind of his movement, and basically I had to create some sort of landscape to try and encompass this environment that wasn't really a reality. So it wasn't like we were in Johannesburg or we are in a very specific place. It was more of a surreal kind of landscape. So we decided to choose, kind of between Greg and I, we thought about different areas and landscapes that we could create. And obviously, Tolaki being a professional mourner, a lot of that kind of space that he would be in would be kind of a cemetery environment. So I created some wooden crosses that were formulated in almost a semicircle on stage that were relatively easy to tour with. And that was the main thing, is this piece was going to tour. And that's normally the approach that we always take with Greg's work, is because the work normally always tours. And that's part of the challenge, is that the design, it needs to be relatively cheap to either make overseas or or to tour with, essentially. So I created the crosses to create some sort of kind of cemetery landscape, but almost a surreal cemetery landscape, as well as some hanging crosses as well, that would move in and out, especially in the amplified version of the show. And then we had a main feature backdrop, which in my mind created the surreal landscape, and a landscape of almost nothingness, that almost translates as what we feel and the loneliness that we feel when we lose a loved one, where we almost enter that limbo of if anyone, and I'm sure everyone has lost a loved one at some point or another, but you reach a point when it's part of that mourning period where you feel like you're in a limbo, where you don't really notice your surroundings and you feel like you're in this empty space. And that backdrop was sort of a representation in my mind on how to kind of sort of convey that. Because the piece is a dance piece, and it's telling the story of the Cion story through dance. It was quite a challenge to try and create these landscapes along with lighting without too many moving parts, of course.
What it felt like for me is, what's the film? Was it Inception, where all the sort of landscapes sort of fold in on themselves all the time? It kind of felt like that. It kind of felt like I was looking at the landscape from above. It felt like I was looking down on the landscape, and it'll become. We'll share some images in a sec to give everyone a sense of how that is. So yeah, absolutely, it does absolutely capture that landscape feel. So
to answer the smoke question, sorry,
yeah, that was where we were, right? Yeah,
the smoke question. So obviously, like in that cemetery environment, we had some very strong images that Greg had done a photo shoot with that I took some kind of ideas from, where you have that misty evening kind of look where you've got like the moonlight shining through trees, and you've just got this kind of heavy mist that's happening, and you've got these beams of light, gray moonlight filtering through the trees. And that was sort of kind of the environment that I think Greg and I sort of wanted, and Manny wanted to create. But again, trying to contain and trying to create those kind of images and trying to contain the haze is always a challenge. But I think depended on the venue, like in the Manny Manham, or at least, sorry, in the John Carney, just naturally that venue, when you switch off the aircon, which was a must for us, that's what we did. So we would keep the aircon on just before the audience entered, and we would switch the aircon off for the duration of the show, which was luckily not too long because the show's only an hour long, and the haze hung really, really nicely, and we kind of had that effect. Yeah.
Fingers crossed, right? Greg, how much does the design influence you once you start working with the dancers? Because obviously, you've got the story in your mind, and you know how to tell that story through movement. But then at a point, the environment that people put you in has got to have a shift, has got to impact that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's always a give and take situation. I know that there are things that have been thrown on me by designer, like, I like it, but it was never, in the planning. It's not in the choreography. It was never in the vision. So it gets me to a place where I'm like to really think about it and say, how do I best use this? Because it is great. It's a great idea. So I don't want to throw it away. I want it to live in the piece. And so, it's those things that you've been offered, and you see, how can I best use this? Because it makes sense for what it is and what it can do to the story. And there are things that I say, great, but not for the piece. Can we talk about that for the next piece? So yeah, it's a give and take all the time situation, and I allow myself to have that open mind when I'm working with designers, because they see things that you cannot see. Because as a choreographer, we tap in really into the emotions sometimes of what the work should be and what you're looking for. And designers are looking at other things. They're looking at the landscape. They're looking at the visual aspect of what the audience will be seeing that you might not be seeing as someone who is so involved in the work. So that flexibility is always important.
And so just flipping onto lighting for a second, the show is quite reliant on moving lights. So I think it's quite a moving light heavy rig. Certainly the version that I saw, and I know at the Joburg Theatre, they have a really good complement of kit, so that makes it easier. So Oliver, when you and Manny are sort of planning this, knowing that it's going on tour, how do you manage that, right? Because there are going to be variables. Not everyone's going to have the same kit. Not everyone's going to have the thing. Are you sort of looking ahead and going, okay, well, I'm going to do X here, knowing that when we get to venue C, that's going to have to be something else? Like, what's your sort of process there?
So it was quite difficult because I think Manny in the very beginning, I think he might have designed it in such a way, because the John Carney, where it was originally conceived, is a very odd shaped kind of theatrical environment. It's almost like a hexagon. And the lighting rig itself is not really your standard proscenium arch theater. You don't have fly bars. You've got lighting positions in quite odd spaces, and nooks and crannies. So when the piece really fitted well in that space, because the piece is kind of meant for a strange environment, and itself. The piece within itself is a strange environment. So translating that to a standard theater, or at least a theater as we know it, like a standard proscenium arch theater, was a little bit of a task, because I had to pick moments that were really important and moments that really helped tell the story, the most important moments, and pick which one was the most important, and then take that and try and see how I can translate that within another environment, and how easily I can translate that in another environment. So there were some elements that I couldn't recreate in a natural box kind of theater environment, but there were many elements that I picked out that were the core of telling the story. And those were the elements that I picked out. And I had to limit myself to those elements, because there's only so many of those that you can put in budget dependent. Because touring, when you tour, often budget is an issue, and you would send your technical writer through, and your promoter on the other side will be like, listen, we can't do this. Can you make a plan? And often that will be the case from venue to venue. So I had to take the essence of the design, of Manny's design, and try and translate that. And a lot of that had to be done with moving lights, just because Manny in the original design used generics or conventional fixtures for most of the rig. Almost, I would say, I think there was a count of 200 generics, I think, maybe a little bit less. And then I think in the original production, there was 8 moving lights, I think, if I'm not mistaken, which wasn't a lot, but the generics, there was plenty specials everywhere, and I had to pick which ones I needed. So essentially, I chose a group of 6 moving lights, and I had to do the entire show with those 6 moving lights, because obviously that was what people could afford, and most people can afford when putting on a dance show in specific cities. And then trying to get that in the board and creating something new, but without infringing on his original vision, and also on Greg's vision, and trying to keep the design as close to what it was. So that most certainly was a challenge, but and there's certain elements that I wish I could have, but sometimes that's a give and take that you have to do when you go on tour.
And how hard is it, Greg, for you on tour, seeing all these different iterations of your show? Because, you know, I mean, I know, you know, choreographically, obviously, a few things might change, like a little bit of placing changes and stuff like that to accommodate the new space. But essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially the choreography kind of is locked down. Your variable inevitably is going to be the lighting. How weird is that for you on tour when you see all these different versions of your show?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the only thing we fight about it with Oliver. Like, what happened to that? You know, right? I'm so used to that. You know, can we bring it back? And then we'll go into this whole conversation about budget and all that. You know, he keeps me out of, you know, of all those discussions, and maybe sometimes he hopes that I will not notice the changes.
Yeah, nothing gets past you.
You're in the piece and you know it so well, because, you know, part of storytelling as a performer on stage is also relating to the light. You know, you relate to, yeah, what kind of light, temperature, you feel all those things. They become part of your memory in terms of performance. So you know exactly, you know, which light should be coming at what point, and you're looking forward to that because you are doing this performance and you are expecting something to happen, and then it doesn't happen, and you go like, shit, you know, excuse my language, but you know, you know what happened to that. So yeah, but you know, as I think between myself and Oliver, there's that kind of understanding that of course we want the work to tour, but also what is critical about making the work tour is to ensure that we don't lose the quality, we don't lose the sincerity of the work, we don't lose the honesty of the work. So so he takes care of that element and ensuring that the quality and the detailing and those important moments are kept and are preserved in the work. And sometimes, yes, I have to go and allow myself to be flexible and compromise somewhere, but you know, without compromising on the work.
Okay.
I think it's if I could jump in there, I think it's a constant battle when you go on tour. You know, if you're doing a franchise musical, I think it's different, because people expect to be paying X amount of money for this kind of show, which I think is kind of not great, because if you're putting on an extraordinary dance work, why shouldn't be anything any different? You know, people normally, when you present a work to tour, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, we will have an archive video of that show, and that will be sent through, and the presenters can have a look at it and see if it's something that they're interested in, and often that archive video is the basis of what they expect to see, and if you don't deliver on that, then it sort of becomes an issue. But then it's always that constant balance between, cool, how do I speak to the promoter about, we need to preserve this element, but it's going to cost you X amount. So it's a constant battle. That it's not really a battle, actually. It's more of how much does the promoter really want to preserve this piece. And also, I think Greg also really pushes promoters to give the extra finance to keep the piece for what it is. And
so just changing direction a little bit here. So obviously, Greg, when you and I were working together, things were a lot simpler. We didn't have a lot of the technology and a lot of the toys. And I'm only calling them toys because I'm jealous, Oliver. That's all it is, right? That you have all these cool things that you use.
And then you came and then you lit full moon.
Full moon. We had a few toys.
And then you brought all of your toys out of the basket, and I was like, what is this? How are you going to go with this? Like, it was amazing. Then it was like walking into a candy shop, and yeah, it was incredible. extraordinary. I'm like, how are we going to replicate this anywhere else? That was my worry, but I was happy that we went there.
Sure. Do you find that you are more aware now of technology when you're creating work and what's possible? Or do you try not let that influence your creation process?
To be honest with you, I'm so spoiled from working with you and working with Oliver that I've literally just, when I go into a process of working, I focus on what the work needs. And I know that I've got people who are looking after that work for the other things that that work will need. You know, the design elements, I know that they will be taken care of. And I think it's that relationship that goes with trust. It's a true collaboration where I'm not saying to a designer, I want this. The designer says, this is what I can offer for this part. I think we can do this for this. Because you give so much creative license to the people you bring on board. And if you give that creative license, it allows just the person to like, whoa, I can go. And there are times when I say, let's pull back, you know, let's make it smaller. Idea is too big. Yeah.
I mean, we've had, not we, as an industry, we've had conversations about design-led performance, and it basically really is contained to the dance world, because, you know, we can say, hey, I've had this great idea, I want to create this light that does this, or this piece that that does this, and it's something that we can have these conversations with choreographers about, because, you know, it is that collaboration. We can bounce ideas off you and you go, oh, actually, yeah, that's nice, I hadn't thought of that, can it then do this as well? And and that's kind of how it grows. And it's Oliver, I don't know how it feels going. You've got a broad portfolio of stuff that you work in, but I always felt that working in dance is one of the most exciting collaborative processes, because it's just freedom. It's freedom of movement. It's freedom of music. It's, I mean, you know,
100%. Like, I think my favorite art form to light is dance, and it's because of those reasons, you know. But also, like Greg said, it's a creative freedom that needs to be understood amongst the entire creative team, you know, because if like Greg always does, he gives you that creative freedom to give your input. And I think if that is shut down, then you can't truly reach your potential for that work. I do believe that there's a vision. There's always an overall vision that you always have to follow, because a choreographer or a director will always have a very specific vision. It might not be a rounded vision, because it might be a new work. It might be a work that, like Cion, a brand new work that's never been done before. And it's also about bouncing ideas off each other and letting the idea evolve. However, at the same time, if you restrict any creative element, then you don't get the true magic that you would normally get with true creative freedom. Obviously, we're all individuals, right? We're all individuals, and we all have different creative minds. And certain ideas work and certain ideas won't. You know, Greg and I, not all my ideas are things that Greg really likes, and vice versa, you know. But it's that getting to that middle ground and having the conversations to try and get to that middle ground to create the real magic. You know?
So how far in advance, Greg, are you talking to your creative team?
Oh, very far. I mean, before we even go into a rehearsal, I think for me it's always critical to, I mean, sometimes I speak to Oliver like 2 years before the production is realized, and I will keep throwing those seeds into the basket and say, what about this? What do you think? This is the idea I have. Think about it, you know, and then it will stay. I know that it will stay in his mind, and then, I mean, sometimes he will see things and he'll send me images, and that's how it kind of like builds itself. in a way, you know. We just, premiered another piece, Broken Chord, in Spain last year. I think we started talking about it like 2 years prior to us having to make that piece. And we spoke about it that it needs to go into somehow unconventional spaces. But you know, after the premiere into those unconventional spaces, we realized just how difficult it is and how just how intimate this piece is, and it needs to be in a theater. It works better in a theater than outside.
And it's still growing, you know, and I believe that this is often brand new original works grow every time they are performed. You know, new ideas also emerge, and I know with Greg's work, often the first performance doesn't mean it's locked down and it needs to be that way, because it's a growing experience, and that production is growing in organically, essentially, you know. And with Broken Chord, it was a very difficult space to be in, because we're in an unconventional theatrical environment, and every show needs to be in an unconventional environment, or an environment that we're not too sure of. And it needs to be organic in that sense. So the show needs to adapt, maybe certain elements don't need to adapt and don't change, but certainly like the scenic design would probably need to change in every single venue that we put it in. So that's sort of the workflow that Greg and I sort of have.
Oh.
I'm going to share a couple of the production images from Cion. Before I do that, so you talk about the work growing, and I know that recently it's just come off the Nelson Mandela stage at the Joburg Theatre, and you were referring to it as the amplified version of the show. Just talk us through that little process while I sort of get all the photographs ready and stuff like that to share with people.
Yeah, I mean, I like big things, and I want things to be blown out of proportion sometimes. and it was such a cool idea to go to the Joburg Theatre, because I was thinking, we are in the Joburg Theatre. We created this work at the Market Theatre, a smaller space. We're going to a space that is 10 times more the size of the audience, but also the stage and what you can do with that stage. And I wanted to create, how do we make this message that is depicted in Cion louder? How do we make that message in Cion more amplified, more bodies, more voices? How do we do that so that also the lighting rig can also grow? Because we cannot, take a work that is created on 9 dancers with its intimacy, and then allow it to live in that kind of a space, which is really huge. Something gets lost, and I wanted to preserve it, but at the same time to ensure that we're amplifying the message as much as possible. So I brought in, the original version has 4 singers. In the amplified version, we have 20 singers. And you bring in the Soweto Gospel Choir. You don't just go in and say, I'm going to bring in the voices to fill in. You bring in the voices that are extraordinary. So when they jump onto that stage, they also bring in their A-class into the production, because the production value is already high, and you cannot filter it down by bringing in voices that will not be able to carry it. And also the same with the dancers. You bring in dancers that are of a high standard. The dancers that I always bring is dancers who have been with the company, and dancers who have trained with the company, so they know the style of the company. They are familiar with the aesthetic of the work that I do. And by the time we get into the production, it's not a struggle of teaching them how to dance, the dance style, the cocktail style, which we call it, because it's a fusion of so many ideas and histories. But they walk into the production knowing exactly what is expected of what their bodies can do.
And I mean, I know the lighting rig at the Joburg Theatre. Oliver, how much time did you have to pull that together? Because the technical term, I believe, is a truckload, right? I mean, they have they've got so much kit. I mean, they have to because the space is huge. For anyone who doesn't know the space, it's a 12-meter wide pros, about 8.5 meters usually trim, and it's about 15 meters deep. It's a really big stage. It's a big black hole. It's a cavern, and you have to just put so much stuff in there to get
fill it
into the space. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a Wagner space. It feels like a Wagner space, you know. And it's I actually had a good amount of time to put it together. You know, Greg spoke to me about it, and I had a good time to think about it.
Okay.
I had a good time. I had a good amount of time to think about how I was going to do things and how I was going to translate Manny's design on this big, like a much bigger scale. And there were many elements that I added in that were not in the original because they had to be added in to fill the space. You know, we had a rig of 24 VL 2600s. In the current version, we had 18 Sharpie Pluses. We had, what else? We had 24.
And that's over and above the theatre stock, because the theatre has a bunch of lead wash 600s and 800s and
yes. So yeah, and
MMXs.
we had 20 800 washes. I basically took the inventory and I said, cool, what can I do with this? And that wasn't my starting point, I promise. But essentially, you know, we had to really grow the piece, like Greg said, and we needed to really fill the space. And also because the design originally, the backdrop was originally black plastic bags. But that presents a safety problem. Because how do you flame retard, black plastic refuse bags?
Well, they're designed to burn, right?
Exactly. So then the original production, we had to treat the backdrop because it doesn't absorb flame retardant spray. You had to pretty much treat it every day, and that wasn't going to work on tour. And also, creating the black plastic bag backdrop in the Joburg Theatre, number one, there was a safety issue. Number two, it was a lot of work to burn all of it together because that's how we kind of originally created it. We burnt the plastic bags together so they would mold together and create this incredible kind of texture in the background. So we resorted to using, I looked all over for some sort of texture that's going to create something similar. And I found Showtex's alu-shape rock. And this was really interesting. It's basically like tin foil with some with a cotton calico over the front of it. And you can basically scrumple it up like tin foil. And it gives you almost this kind of mountain-like landscape once you crumple it out and stretch it out. And it gave us this incredible texture. And that's what we kind of used for the very first amplified version. And also it was nice and light to tour with, so we could roll it up and pop it on a plane. And Bob's your uncle, it's easy enough to take with, you know.
And the nice thing about that stuff is because you're rolling it up every time you hang it up, it looks different, right? Because it's got new creases and new crinkles, so it becomes an incredibly organic thing. Okay, so I've got some pictures ready to go. So I'm gonna share those with everyone. And this, I mean, I look at this and I can see Manny's influence here, because nice strong backlight, just the littlest bit of glow on the face, right? And I know that's a Manny. Manny loves just this soft little lick of light on the face, and I can absolutely see that coming in. So fair dues to you, Oliver, for nod, you know, the nod to Manny. This is one of the nice things for me that was happening all through the pieces. You would have these moments where it would blow out into the full stage and then come right back down into these little moments where you just focus down. Talk to us a little bit about that from a company point of view, Greg, when you're on tour. how much time do you get to rehearse your company to these new positions? Because the lighting positions change from venue to venue, I assume. And then Oliver, how much time do you have to clean all of this stuff up as you go through venue to venue?
Yeah. I mean, Oliver takes most of the time, actually, to be honest with you. I mean, we come in really when he's ready, because I mean, the dancers know the piece, but obviously they need to familiarize themselves with all the changes that have taken place. And every time, as it should be, every venue will take, we need to learn, kind of like learn your new geography. Where are you standing? Which side of the light? Which side is the light coming? Which part of the body that light should be lighting? So we every performance or every venue is us learning the geography of the piece again, so that they know where they are standing with the lights. Because the worst is to see the lighting not really fulfilling its mission, because the performer is not facing the right way, and therefore that lighting at a specific moment becomes useless. So for me, it's quite critical that the dancers know exactly where the light is coming from, which part of the body is important for that moment that the light needs to catch.
And again, it may just have been where I was sitting, but even if I look at the production photographs, it doesn't look like there are a lot of spike marks on the stage. It really feels like
No,
that it's a much more organic process, and I think that's quite beautiful. I don't know, Oliver, if I'm right in that.
I think the beauty of working with Greg and Vuyani, the dance company, is the dancers are incredibly disciplined in terms of hitting their mark every time. And often those marks might not be specific spike marks. It might be a line of sight. It could be a chair in the first row, or it could be maybe a boom, a lighting boom next to them, that they create a sense of space for themselves, and they go, cool, this is where I need to be. And every time I work with the Vuyani team, they always seem to hit the mark. There are certain positions that need to be spiked as a central starting point. That kind of forms the basis of where everything else is. So often I will do a center spike, spike mark, which is how the piece starts. This piece starts organically in the beginning, with an entire group sitting basically on the center mark. And as long as the dancers sort of understand where that mark is, once that mark is spiked, it's pretty much the dancers know exactly where they are in the space, and they use that. I don't know if they use that as a central element, but I know that that's normally the mark that is the sole starting point, essentially. And also, no one likes a stage full of spike marks.
yeah,
Especially
it is my work.
It's the worst. And I think ever since I started working with Greg's never liked seeing big spike marks or even small spike marks. So it's more of, that's why, I'll plot and I will do spike marks for myself, and I'll bring the cast in and kind of give them a chance to tell me, with Greg, tell me where they're going to be for very specific specials. And then once those are locked down, then I move the moving lights or wherever the specials need to specifically be. That's normally the process. The process will be dancers will come and do a placing call, essentially. And Greg will tell me, okay, cool, I'm happy with that position. I'm happy with that position. And then I will move the fixtures accordingly. And I will normally spike and then take the spikes off.
You've muted yourself, Oliver. There we go.
Back again. So I'll normally take the spikes off the stage, and I'll mark the stage for focusing purposes, but then eventually I will take all those marks off, and then we'll rehearse the piece. And almost 100% of the time, when the dance team and the dance company are on stage and they rehearse it once or twice, they've got it. It's like clockwork, you know.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And something else that is consistent through the piece, and you can just see it here, is there's always depth, right? There's always narrative going on in the background. So whenever someone is featured, there was always a little lick of light or a little dust somewhere, just sort of filling it in, and it creates this wonderful sense of depth. So then here, obviously, we're pulling back out again into company. I know because you've mentioned, and I also know the kit list that's there. There's a lot of LED stuff in the rig, which I find can be quite a hard light. It's quite a brittle light source. And I find it quite hard actually on dance, because you want that lovely soft smooshiness of tungsten, right? Because it just does things. How do you find, Oliver, dealing with LED and dance in particular?
So it's interesting. I took Manny's palette, which consisted of only 3 colors. So the one was 203, which is just it's a quarter CTB. Then it was 063, which is mistaken, and open white. I like to call open white a color because it is a color, but it was all lit in tungsten. So, and then he used 174 for which is
Dark steel blue.
Steel blue, which is not actually a saturated color, but it created the blues. And he used these kind of hues of blues and open white to create the 2 different parts of the story. So the piece starts as a very cold kind of environment, and it's almost, in my head, it's like this opening of a morning, someone mourning, and it's this feeling of emptiness and coldness and death, essentially. And the piece starts very small, and it starts in this cool environment, but there's always a lick of warmth that is present, because it almost signifies kind of a resurgence of kind of celebrating someone's life, or kind of moving past that mourning period. And essentially the piece moves just from cool to warm, and there's no other saturated colors. There's no magenta, there's no there's no greens, there's no truly saturated strong colors, except for the 2 warm and cool moments. And the piece evolved, and towards the end we move to a completely warm environment, because it's almost the solidarity and this this opening up into this warmth of the story. So that's how Manny originally kind of put it together. And he would always have licks of warm side light that's complementing the kind of cool backlight. So I had to translate that with LED, and a lot of the Rogue fixtures, they have a very indigo kind of blue LED, which is very strong, and it's great for kind of concerts and stuff, and kind of television, but kind of trying to pastel that up was not too difficult, but it was kind of trying to find the right palette, and playing with the color. Luckily, some of the side light was tungsten, and I could replicate by using some of the side light on a surface, and then using the LED top light and trying to match the 2 colors, trying to get the best possible match I could get, so I could replicate that same feel of light from the top as well as from the sides. But again, LED has a very specific quality about it, and also the dimming curve is quite can be quite harsh. And this piece originally was lit mostly with tungsten, so there was very slow fades. There was 40-second Q fade times. There were very interesting fading moments, which I couldn't really replicate with the LED rig. I mean, I could, but it's it just doesn't quite feel the same. So that was a challenge. But I think we came up with something new, because the world is moving LED, and LED is becoming quite advanced. It's getting to the point where the luster threes are almost as better than tungsten.
There we go. There's the plug. I was going to squeeze it in, but you did it unprompted. Well done. Checks in the post.
But again, it's I always miss that element of tungsten, because it's a natural form of light. It's true. It's a carbon element. That's what it is. It's real light, if I could say that. So that merge was quite interesting, and to try and keep the essence of managed design was not an easy task.
No, I can believe that. So here's a shot that we start to see the background appearing here, and just touching on, because you've got some vocalists in the show, which brings another sort of layer of complexity into the lighting, so because it's not just dance lighting anymore, right? You're now dealing with follow spots or specials or whatever that is. And again, that on tour becomes something else, becomes another sort of thing to deal with. Any sort of considerations that sort of go into it when you know that going in?
So this time around, actually, the amplified version, I decided to use a follow spot. In the original version, we did not have a follow spot, but I really wished that we did, because we've only got one follow spot in the show, and we only use it for the amplified version. But this time around, I really felt like I needed to highlight Tolaki, the main character, and also this lead singer that you're seeing now, just have a beautiful headshot where I could create the environment and have everyone in the background, but really just highlight that person, and make her the feature, but without her popping too much from the environment. So the people in the background essentially become part of the set.
Because that probably would have been an interesting conversation with Greg, because I know from Greg you're not a fan of follow spots.
This is one of those elements
anything that's moving, except dancers on stage. Yeah, when I have follow spots and I have moving lights moving with us, I feel like, oh gosh, we're in competition. But I think if it's done in such a subtle way, I say the most intelligent thing about lights is that when we don't notice the change, when we are absorbed into or taken and transported into a new environment without us having to notice, oh, now the lights are changing, oh, now there's this happening. That for me is brilliance. There are absolutely no issues with it. It is when you start to see that, oh, okay, this light is moving there, that light is moving there. It's like, it feels like we're in a somehow a different show, or like a rock concert.
It also becomes lighting, not really about the.
It becomes lighting, not and I don't want to see them. I don't want to notice the change. And for me, I think that's the biggest thing I've always said to my designers, like, allow us not to see the change, because that's when your brilliance as a designer comes shining in, and we can complement the design, your design, and the execution of that design, when really it stands out for what it is, because it complements the work, like a key and a lock, that they need to work together. The choreography and the lighting, and not, let me not see that change. And on that note, Declan, I have to unfortunately also leave.
Absolutely.
But it's been a huge pleasure chatting to you and with Oliver. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Greg, thank you very much for joining us. I do appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Greg.
I've got two more things I just want to chat to you about, if you've got a few more minutes for us. But Greg, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good evening, and congratulations on an extraordinary work.
Thank you. Thanks to Oliver also for opening up, that that interest in the work and really diving in every time, and imagining beyond what my own imagination can take me. So thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Have a good evening.
And good night. Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
Brilliant. I just wanted to touch base, just to see what your plans are for the production moving forwards. Have you got? Are there more plans? Have you got other ideas percolating? Have you got sort of things brewing?
I think the production's at a point where it's nicely rounded, and I think we've solidified the design, and it's actually touring to Germany, to the Weimar Festival in May. So that will be a first show. Well, the first tour since lockdown. And then we are touring. Gosh, we toured to Italy, I think, at the end of the year. So the piece is moving, and it's one of those pieces that's almost one of Greg's highlight pieces, that a lot of people kind of want, which is awesome. And then I've obviously got Broken Chord, which is another new piece of his, that is touring to Austria in April. So yeah, it's moving, and it's great to see that the industry is somewhat opening up, because it's been pretty dark times in South Africa over the past 2 years.
Been dark times for everyone. I think it's been
everyone.
It's been a bit weird. Been a bit weird. Oliver, thank you so much for your time and for joining us. I really appreciate it. It's been good catching up with you as always. Super jealous again that you got to work with a legend like Manny as closely as you did. And congratulations on an amazing design. Really, really good stuff.
Thanks, Dick. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's so great to be on this platform and speak to invisible people as well.
It takes getting used to, right?
I know. I feel like we're just talking, but actually speaking to people.
But yeah. So thank you very much. I appreciate you
for having
joining the Light Bytes session.
Cool.
And yeah, we'll catch up again soon. Take care.
All right. Ciao.
So everyone else, thank you for joining us for this edition of Light Bytes. Our next edition, so first Thursday of April, which is April the 7th. Please do join us. We will be chatting to Fabian Wagner, who is a cinematographer whose work you're probably most familiar with from the series Game of Thrones. He's also done a lot of work on the Marvel movies and some of the DC movies as well. So please join us for Dragons and Superheroes, which is our next session coming up in April. That will be what we call a hybrid session. So we will be with a live studio audience here in the London Playhouse. Please do come down. You're welcome to join us. Sign up on the website. If you want to come and attend the live event, ping us an email, lightbytes@etcconnect.com, and we'll put you on the guest list. We look forward to seeing you then. Otherwise, we will see you back online. Thank you so much, and have a good evening.